Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Seekamentor podcast series. I'm your host Dhruv Gupta, and we generally discuss anything about product management, topics in general. And if you want to move your career or pivot your career into product management, how you can do that. And today we have with us Mehvesh Ibrahim, and she's bringing us with a lot of experience into product management, working with diverse fields. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, Mehvesh. So let's start with introductions. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Dhruv. A pleasure to be here. So I'll just give a small bit about myself. I started out with my career as a technology analyst at Deloitte. After graduating from MIT Manipal with a BTech degree. At Deloitte, I used to work for a public sector client, and my stint over there helped me essentially realize that I love to be a part of the decision making process, and that led me to pursue PGDM at SPJMR, from where I then transitioned into a PM role at InfoEdge. And the last 4 years, I've been working as a senior PM at Shiksha.com, which essentially is like the education vertical of InfoEdge, where we provide college and exam related content to students who are looking for admission into the UG and PG fields. Currently, I'm leading initiatives for engagement on the platform via content, videos, etc. And I'm also leading initiatives for retention and client delivery through college recommendations, where we've worked on AI, ML algorithms, and so on. That's about work. And when I'm not working, I love reading. I'm into both fiction and non-fiction, genres. I keep toggling between them. And at present, I'm currently obsessed with knowing about the stock market. So I'm just reading a lot about that. So yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, great to know that reading is a passion of yours as well. So today's topic is about first principles thinking, and can you just explain a bit what first principle thinking is in your own words, and then how it is different from traditional thinking methods?
Right. So, Dhruv, first of all, obviously, first principles is not new to and that concept has been long there in the realms of physics and maths and everything, with Aristotle having come up with it. But in the product space, essentially, it is also very important because it essentially involves effective deconstruction, where it could be of a product or even a problem statement, and where you just try to break down a problem statement, product, or anything that you're working on into constituent blocks, which essentially cannot be broken down any further. And once we have that ready, we can then work up and work on the solutions to create innovation. Where it differs from traditional thinking essentially is that sometimes, in traditional thinking, what happens is that there is a certain way of things, an approach that is accepted upon, and we work on top of that. So that leads to certain assumptions that stay in the product, that don't get broken down, and that leaves a little less way for innovation to happen. And that I keep reminding myself of the famous statement that Henry Ford had made, that if he had asked people to what would they want, they would have probably asked for faster horses, and a car kind of innovation would not have come into being. So that's where the power of fundamental breaking down is important. And because you're breaking down any problem statement into its fundamental units, we tend to then, have better RCAs, or, root cause analysis. We're not doing analysis at a surface level. So that's traditionally, the primary difference that I see. And I think that leads to, why a first principle thinking can get better long-term sustainable solution, whereas traditional thinking can sometimes stop you at short term. Having said that, it's not all rosy also. First principles thinking would, involve a lot of time and effort to understand that code lead. And sometimes one might have to balance out. And that's what we do in office or in regular work as well.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. Yeah. That's understandable as well, that generally the focus is on breaking down the problem into smaller chunks and then handling them, or trying to solve those chunks, incrementally,
yeah.
try to solve the entire problem. So makes sense. So in your understanding, what role does first principles thinking play in your
Hmm.
approach to management?
Right. So the way I see it, right, for me, first principles thinking in a way helps me differentiate between what is a product manager versus what is a project manager. It helps me understand my role better as a product manager, what I bring to the table. I'll explain that what I mean to say over here, because a project manager essentially is responsible for the execution, for planning, for scoping out things, and delivery. So in a way, it is they are defining or they are responsible for the output. Whereas a product manager essentially looks at what is the need of the user that is not solved yet, what is the business viability of that, and essentially it is the outcome that we drive.
Yeah.
So for me, first principle works as an anchor that I see, okay, this is what is expected of my role as a product manager. So I'll give you an example, like, in a product like Shiksha, where we have multiple stakeholders. And now in Shiksha, we've moved to the concept of a pod also, where, multiple stakeholders also sit together and they think of the business problem. So you get like a lot of ideas from different teams and very smart people, design, engineering, QA, content, SEO, etc. And sometimes what that can do to a product manager is that can trap him or her into like a tunnel vision, or say like something where you're wearing a horse's blinder because too many ideas and you're just working on those ideas. So I force myself often nowadays to go back to the fundamentals, because that really helps me think about the right problems to solve, focus deeply on the unmet need of my user customer, and that I validate with business viability.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's quite important to consider as well, that you understand what the needs of the customer as well as your business vision and
Yeah.
imperative, and then you create a path which is helping both, right? And then the business wants to earn money and grow their business, whereas you as product manager responsible to understand the needs of the customer and then implement those solutions. So definitely,
Yeah.
first principles thinking, work in that way completely. Now, another one is that how do you break down a complex product problem to identify its core elements, essentially? So is there a process
Hmm.
you follow? Is there a framework you follow in that aspect?
Yeah, so actually, that when I started out and I was not exposed to the idea of first principles and was just moving into the product domain, there were a lot of frameworks like the circles method, or there are many more that I used to look at. But now, after truly understanding, or rather trying to understand how first principles in a way doesn't if you're following the first principles, you might not need any certain framework.
Yeah.
It's just about getting those fundamentals right. And before we go into the product problem statement, I'll
Yeah.
try to give a small example with, say, like a product in itself. Okay, so this is the kind of exercises that I do myself.
Hmm.
So let's say I want to define a car, a very
Hmm.
simple physical product, right? So a car, what is a car? It's essentially a vehicle that carries people or goods from one place to another.
Hmm.
So that's fair. That's a fair understanding. That's a definition. But is that complete? Maybe not, because an aeroplane also does the same thing. If
Yeah.
if I go by that definition, or a ship also does that. So then a variable comes into play, maybe, which is like mode of transport. And then I
Hmm.
say, okay, mode of transport for an aeroplane is air, for a ship it's water, and then for a car it's road.
Yeah.
Still, is that complete? No, it's not yet complete, because even a bus is a vehicle that runs on a road and carries people and goods from one place to the other. So then another variable comes up, which is probably capacity. And I say, okay, a bus carries, 50 to 60 people, whereas a car generally would carry 4 to 6.
Yeah.
Then I again, ask myself, is that again complete? No. An auto rickshaw in certain cases could also possibly carry 4 or 6 people, a commercial, auto rickshaw. So then this way, more and more variables keep coming into the play. So then again, another variable would come, say like the number of wheels, or, the horsepower, or the dimensions. So essentially, this is one way that I try to deconstruct any physical thing also, or any product. And then I try to create a table where the different variables would be, say, x-axis, and then my different elements would be in the y-axis. And I'm just trying to do a yes or a no. And once we have that, that essentially removes all kind of ambiguity with regards to what is that problem that you're working with. So this is the same framework, if you can call this a framework, I try to apply when I'm looking at a problem statement. I first try to, sharpen the problem statement. So
Yeah.
as product managers, essentially everything we're doing is a problem statement. Improve the engagement rate for something, or whatever. So try to
Mm.
first understand what is the problem statement. How can I keep defining what, why, and then come down to the actual problem statement.
Yeah.
Then I move to my probing questions, which is essentially trying to answer what does my product do, why are we into this business, etc. And then try and challenge any assumptions that might come along the way.
Yeah.
So I'll take an example, for our viewers over here. So say suppose we're looking at I'm a product manager for Instagram, and I'm looking at a problem statement which is improve the engagement rate of the app. So
Mm.
first and foremost, the questions that I would ask myself and even the management would be, what is engagement rate?
Yeah.
Is it defined by likes, shares, comments, or is it time spent on the app, or DAU or MAU? So first is, what is that engagement that I'm talking about? Then I'll move to what is my target, like and what is the current status? Where are we? What When we say improve engagement, what is that metric that we're looking at? Then I'll move into my probing questions, which is essentially a very basic thing, maybe not something that an existing manager would do, but a new manager would probably have to do. Who is my target customer, and then what motivates them? What is their core need? What factors influence them to use my app? Then
Mm.
I'll move into the why. Why is this important for business? Is it that more time that a user spends on the app, there is more ads and hence more revenue? Or is it that more active users lead me to having more retention and hence more revenue? Or what is it that drives the app, drives the engagement, which then drives the revenue? Then I would move into, say, how do I do it? So first is what are the different elements through which the users engage on Instagram? So stories, reels, etc. What factors contribute to high engagement? Is it a certain point of the day? When do they, interact the most? And how do they currently experience the app? How do they, engage on the different elements that I have on the app? And these are the hows and the whys that I would do to probe. And then I would move into the other aspect, which is essentially like, what are the challenges that my customers or users would be facing on the app right now that I do not know of, or that we haven't solved, and what are the competitors doing in this space? So essentially, there is no certain framework, but it is just getting all those different questions that you need to answer. And I think somewhere the solution or the answer lies within these questions that get answered. So this is the framework that I follow generally for my own product, and sometimes even for just any other product that I'm just trying to understand about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense, that you need to understand first the problem statement itself, right? And you need to ask those right
Yeah,
questions to the management or to the end user itself, right? That what is needed to be required to solve that problem, right? And then you will have many variables which is impacting that
yeah,
problem, but you need to prioritize the ones which are impacting the most and then solve those first, right? I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
makes sense. And then comes up, I mean, if it's a existing product or a new product you are building, and then if it's a new one, then then you'll come to MVP, etc. Right? If it's an existing one, then as you mentioned, then you'll understand what is the most important variable which will impact the
Yeah,
most 20 rule, etc. Right? So and then take it forward accordingly. So it completely makes sense, Mehvesh. And on that,
yeah.
so the next one is in your understanding, right? What are some of the
Hmm.
challenges face when you are trying to implement first principles thinking in product management?
Yeah, so I think the one of the key challenges is that because it involves going back to basics, fundamentals, asking the users, understanding so much about your user, it can be very time consuming. So and sometimes you might not have the bandwidth to invest a lot in a detailed user research study, because a good user research study would take lots and lots of time if you want to get a meaningful output out of it. So that's one challenge that I see. Second, that I see in day to day, working also, is that there can sometimes be a resistance to change, because like I was saying, in a traditional way, some things, some ways of working are accepted as the source of truth. So if you try to challenge that, or question that, so there can be some resistance with respect to why do you want to do it, let's just continue the way it is. So that's the second challenge that I see. And you know and I've seen this in my work also, is that if I want to not have a lot of tech debt, in a certain way, and then do things the right way, it might take time, and hence there will be a slow, there will be failures that will come along the way. So one has to be okay with probably short-term losses to have long-term gains. But again, it is not something that one can directly navigate so easily, because every business is very different, and in a business like ours, it's very seasonal. So it's difficult to sometimes get things done in that way, in the right first principles way. So those are some of the challenges that I generally see.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And the other one is when analyzing the user needs and market demands, how one can make
Mhm.
ensure that you are not just relying on assumptions, but actually digging into first principles, right? So is there a way to do that?
Yeah, I think the process is very similar. It's essentially to dig deep into the first principles. The key is to keep going back to what the users need, what is the unsolved problem. Sometimes when the product is mature, we think that we've already done this, we're way past this, so we know the product market fit, but that also evolves over time. There might be some other competitor that comes along the way and has already solved that problem that you were trying to solve, so you have to innovate again or rethink again. So the key is to keep going back to the user. And essentially, the way we do it at Shiksha is we have a user research team with which, with whom we sit, or I sit as a product manager, and we try to first understand, remove the product from our mind, and just talk about what a student would be going through in the admission journey. What is it that he or she is looking for? What are the different ways in which we can, intervene and provide a solution? But again, that's very time consuming, so that qualitatively sometimes it becomes difficult. So what we do otherwise is that we have quantitative methods. And essentially, as a product manager, what I do is, if I believe that this is this is what I am hypothesizing in a way. And again, that's an assumption. But if I'm hypothesizing, I try to invalidate that through some experiments or tests. And that helps move things faster, because, sometimes getting user information is a little too tricky. So you try and create a hypothesis, invalidate it, validate it, kill your product or move ahead, do A/B. So that's what we do.
Yeah, yeah. No, it makes sense. And as you mentioned, that it's quite important that you at least look from qualitative research point of view, and the quantitative
Yeah.
research, the quantitative data you have, and then obviously the market forces, which is your what your competitors are doing, etc. Because you need to be at least benchmark what the competitors are offering, right? In that aspect, in
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
so yeah, make sense completely and cover these things. And there are other factors as well, other ways to
Maybe,
understand
yeah,
problem statement and not go with the assumptions, as you mentioned, that you create your hypothesis and then validate or invalidate it accordingly. Would also do that, and then you
yeah,
go with either doing the MVP or the prototype, create that prototype and then testing it like with the users or your user research team. Cool.
So,
So
actually, yeah, no, no, on that note, I had read a very interesting article at by Harvard Business School that a lot of times we are so fixated, no, product managers, they get a little too attached to their product and fixated on their hypothesis that we are looking to validate that hypothesis. We're not ready to invalidate it.
yeah.
So but I think that the key takeaway from that article was that if your hypothesis is invalidated or it is inconclusive, is when you should kill the product. You should continue only if it is validated, which is something that we generally tend to not do. I mean, in reality, it is कि या तो hypothesis validate होता है या inconclusive. We as you say, maybe I was right, and that's why it was inconclusive. So I'll continue and I'll scale up. So that was something interesting that
Yeah,
stuck with me.
makes sense. Yeah, most of us generally go with, given the time constraint we have, we can't invalidate all the hypotheses, so we go with the one to validate and then move forward.
Yeah,
But I I think, yeah, this is a good insight in terms of that, you to try to invalidate those hypotheses, right? Instead of going the obvious route of validating your hypothesis, right? So
yeah.
sense. Um, all right. So the next one is, when developing a new product or a feature, how do you balance first principles thinking with the need to align with the existing company strategies or market realities?
Yeah, a very pertinent question, I would say, because a lot of times it's easier, done on paper and applied theoretically, and but when things come to shove, we don't have that kind of liberty in the market, when the market reality is such. So I think first that I or anybody here in the product team of Shiksha we do is that we see the effort versus the outcome, potential outcome. When I say that, because what I essentially mean is that at Shiksha, and this is true for any business that is seasonal, right? But Shiksha more so, it is a very seasonal business where essentially most of the revenue that it comes during the admission phase, which is generally June to August to September, and then there is a bit of a lull phase where we're actually thinking about new projects, which will then impact us in the next season. Now, if in the middle of the season there is an idea that gets sparked for business for generating revenue, um, it will need rapid prototyping, it will need faster experiments and iterations. And in that, incremental work with certain assumptions might be easier to test than to go back to intensive user research.
Hmm.
So that's where sometimes we do balance out with incremental work to test out. But what we also try to do is that once those assumptions are validated and we've got the business in the current year, it's important to see for the next 10 years we might not want to continue this way. And then when there is a bit of a lean season where we can develop the product in a better way, we go back to avoid tech debt or tech maintenance. And then work in a long-term solution way. So that's essentially one of the ways that I try to navigate through this juggle between these two things. And the second is that if I understand correctly, if there are times when there is a bit of a misalignment or slightly different alignment between what the business has decided to do in terms of what strategies we're going forward with and what maybe as first principles you would think or what potential thoughts could come to your mind. So in such a case, and what I essentially do is go with the business with the decision that we've taken, then try and build a case around why I think this thing we should pivot or we should change slightly with some primary research, secondary research, with competition analysis. and then try and build a case around it. Once the case is built with regards to at least convincing myself that this seems doable, or this seems like that it seems like a thing that we should not overlook, is when I go back to the management, and we try to see if there are any low hanging fruits that I can pick up within the product, where I can in test what I'm thinking out, and then keep milestones and come back to it if required. And if what I'm saying is validated, then there are times where you've moved on. So for example, in Shiksha essentially has been like a content heavy platform. Like the last 10 years, we were more into writing content for colleges and exams. And we've seen in the last 2 3 years there's a lot of need uh, for consuming content in a different way. Like, people, Gen Zs more so don't like to read content anymore. They like to consume in a fast, crisp way. So building strategies around that took a lot of building of the case. Why is it important? How people are moving to Instagram and YouTube and stuff, and how do we catch up to them? But it does pay out in the long run. You know, slowly making your way through along with the management and the product, fitting it into the product vision. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. So I think we have covered most of the questions related to first principles thinking. Now, the last question I have is, what advice would you give to the aspiring product managers who want to incorporate these first principles thinking into their daily work, and any other pointer also you would like to mention how they can pivot into this career and build their career into product management as well?
Yeah, I think one thing that yeah, is something that, because I keep doing that as a practice, and I think any aspiring product manager or an existing product manager should also do, is just try to have a structured thinking process. Like structuring helps, I think, anywhere, even in a consulting role, but a lot more in product management, because you're dealing with so many different people, different stakeholders. Ambiguity gets lost if you're, you have a structured approach. And with a structured approach, try with smaller things like deconstructions, product teardowns. Just try to see how would you, break a product down into its core fundamentals. And that product need not be digital product; it can be an everyday thing. So something that I've learned from my manager, he used to, advocate this a lot. Like deconstruction is just so important, because it's important for a product manager to be very crisp in what we communicate to the outside world and to our internal stakeholders, because we are essentially that thread holding the different pieces together and the different teams together. So that is one, deconstruction. And the other thing is this, which I deeply feel is the ability to question, to keep questioning, have a curious bent of mind, not limited to only when you're working on strategizing a roadmap, but I've seen even in meetings, or in any brainstorming sessions, it's important that we some idea comes up, that if you don't think you're aligned to that, keep making the group think on why we're thinking about this, why is this important right now. um, that's one. I think for me, those are the two main takeaways that I would probably advise. And then, of course, have a user first approach. Just think about the user. Why would a user pay for your product? Would you, as a user, pay for this product that you're trying to build? So I think if we get all of these things right, a large part of product management gets sorted, in my opinion and in my experience.
Yep, completely all valid points, for any of the budding product managers or aspiring product managers. And yeah, I mean, even I say the same, that you understand your product, understand the user needs, your user, do your customer research well, and think it as think from user's point of view, right? If you are the one who has to buy this,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
it, and how would you want this to be in terms of user experience or functionality point of view, and then take it from there as well. Yeah, intuition is also good to have, but then again, mostly you need to rely on the data to take decisions.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's always good
So
to.
data is important, but even I was hearing a podcast by Dipinder Goyal, obviously the founder of Zomato, and he said that he keeps using his product just to feel what the end consumer is feeling. And he says that if at some point if I'm using the product and there's a frustration on my face or I have this feeling of irritation, I absolutely go and communicate that to my team, because if I am feeling that frustration, having known the product, being so used to the product, imagine what would be the plight of the customer. So I think, empathizing with the customer, I think is very important as product managers,
Yeah,
that we should keep, you know, track of and keep doing that on a daily basis.
makes sense. Makes sense completely. All right, I think we are at the end of our session and this episode as well. So yeah, be curious, be learning, keep learning and keep moving. That's the motto always. So
Yeah.
please, it's again, it's a pleasure to have you here, Mevesh, and it was a pleasure for me as well to host you and understand a bit about first thinking principles and know more about product management in general, etc. as well. So yeah, in the end, I would say that please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Please share this video as well with your friends, whoever is there into product management or wants to be into product management space. And yeah, comment any other pointers or any other topic you want us to cover in the comment section, and we'll cover those in our next sessions. So yeah, I think we can end the session here.